Well, Jared Kushner and the U.S. delegation toasted American leadership in the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem this morning. Just 50 miles away, Israeli forces clashed with protesters along the razor wire fence between the Gaza Strip and Israel. Just today, 52 Palestinians were killed and almost 2,000 were injured. Israeli defense forces accused Hamas of leading a terrorist operation under the cover of masses of people. They say some of the protesters threw rocks, firebombs, and explosives at the barrier. Jeremy Bash, your thoughts? I watched the ceremony unfold this morning, obviously an historic day. But as with anything in the Middle East, it all seems to be zero-sum. One side gets what they want, and spasms result on the other end of the spectrum.
Well, when Harry Truman recognized Israel in 1948 and sent his first ambassador to the Holy Land, the ambassador couldn't get to Jerusalem because, of course, there was fighting there. It was a city under siege. And so he took up residence in Tel Aviv, and that's where the Soviet ambassador went, and that's where journalists went, and that became the de facto embassy. And that's sort of the historical accident that really resulted in the U.S. Embassy being in Tel Aviv. So today, America did right a historical wrong and put the embassy in the proper capital of Israel in Jerusalem. And that part of the city, by the way, is never going to be part of a final status agreement with Palestinians. Palestinians may have a capital in East Jerusalem. But as you know, Nicolle, there's also the broader issue of Israeli-Palestinian peace. And unfortunately, I don't think we're any closer to that today. Well,
let me put you on the spot. Would you have, did the Obama administration consider doing this?
Well, it was considered because it was American law since 1995, a bipartisan bill that required the embassy moving to Jerusalem, but gave the president the ability to waive that in the interest of pursuing the peace process. So I'm sure it came up in the Obama administration, but honestly, I don't think anybody gave it serious consideration because they worried it would derail the peace process. In fact, there is no peace process today to derail.
So do you support today's opening of the embassy in Jerusalem? Are you supportive of that?
Very much so. And it was the policy of the United States on a bipartisan basis, Democrats and Republicans from Congress and administrations going back many years. In fact, the Democratic national committees and the Republican national committees statements at conventions, the platforms have always called for this. It's been part of the American foreign policy scene for nearly a generation.
I interviewed the Israeli ambassador when the announcement was made that they would do this, and he said this is long overdue and whatnot. And I said, well, why do you think it took Donald Trump? Do you think he simply knows more about the Middle East? I mean, you certainly had a good friend in the Bush administration. Right. I know there were mixed results and mixed feelings during the Obama administration, but do you think it was Donald Trump's commitment to Israel? Do you think it was his ignorance of the region, or do you think it was what Jeremy Bash just said? There is no peace process.
I think there is no peace process, but I also think this is what always sort of concerns me from just a domestic standpoint. Who does this help? I mean, yes, maybe it increases and improves our relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and yes, there's a long history to it, but if it leaves the region more unstable, if it leads to increased violence, I don't know why we needed to do this now. And again, there are historical precedents to it, but if it leads to an inability to initiate the kind of policies we want in other parts of the Middle East, I don't know if we needed to do this right now.
I think opponents and supporters have both exaggerated the impact of this. There wasn't a peace process before, and there's not going to be a peace process now. I would say this president and this White House does not understand the difference between having a gesture, having a bone to throw to their domestic base, and creating a viable policy. Whoopee, they got us out of the Iran deal. What's their Iran policy? They don't have one. They moved the embassy. What's their policy on reducing tension with the Palestinians? They don't have one. And it's the absence of any coherent vision. When you hear John Bolton being interviewed and he talks in these circles trying to explain how we're better off now with no Iran deal, you get dizzy. And they haven't figured it out. You know, it's one thing to be a Fox pundit. It's another thing to be the national
security advisor. Let me give you each 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think what happened today is the right thing, but I think the innate tension we're feeling and we're seeing politically is this. Diplomacy is about advancing stability on the world stage. Donald Trump is advancing volatility because of exactly what Jennifer Rubin said. There is no next plan. There is no next plan in Iran, with North Korea, with Cuba, with Syria. There's a volatility that creates a restlessness on the world stage.
I've covered a lot of decades now of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, and one of the things that Republicans and Democrats agreed about as they approached this incredibly difficult problem was that the status of Jerusalem was something you would put off to the very end, because there was a reason for that. Smart people, very conservative, very liberal, all said, this is going to be the thing that could blow it all up, so we got to solve everything else, and then we'll get to this at the very end. There was a reason for that. These were smart people of very disparate ideological standings and views. they were right, and this is wrong.
All right, we're out of time. I could always talk to this table forever. That's why I'm always late for poor Katie. My thanks to Jerry Bash, Jason Johnson, John Heilemann, Jennifer Rubin, David Jolly. It does it for our hour. I'm Nicolle Wallace, MT.